All right, let's talk about Canada. It's a great country. You know it, I know it. But where did the name come from? It wasn't from a contest or a marketing meeting, that's for sure. The story starts way back in 1535 with a French explorer named Jacques Cartier. He was sailing up the St. Lawrence River, probably looking for a shortcut to Asia. Spoiler alert, he did not find. Instead, he met some local Iroquoian people. He asked a couple of young guides what this place was called. They were just trying to be helpful, pointing the way to their village. The young men told Cartier about Canada. Now, when they said Canada, they weren't talking about a massive country stretching from sea to sea to sea. They were talking about their village, the settlement of Stadacona, which is where Quebec City is today. The word Canada simply meant village or settlement in their language. Imagine asking someone for directions to the nearest town and then deciding to name the entire continent after it. That's basically what happened here. It's a story so Canadian, it hurts. So Cartier goes back to France, waving his maps around and talking about this grand place called Canada. At first, the name just meant the small stretch along the St. Lawrence River. But as French explorers and settlers kept coming, the name began to spread. European mapmakers, who'd never seen a moose or the Canadian shield, started writing Canada in bigger letters on their maps. The name grew as the French pushed inland and claimed land for their king. It spread like gossip, getting bigger and farther. By the 1550s, not long after Cartier, Canada was the go-to name on European maps. When Samuel de Champlain founded Quebec City in 1608, the colony was officially New France. Still, everyone called the region Canada. Then the British arrived. After wars ending with the 7 Years' War, France ceded its territories to Britain in 1763. The British renamed it the Province of Quebec. But habits held. People had called the area Canada for over 2 centuries and didn't stop for a new flag. Finally, Britain relented. In 1791, they split the province into 2 colonies, Upper Canada, Lower Canada. Naming them the Canadas made the name legal. From there, it took only time for Canada to become the name of the whole country, coast to coast. When the name Canada was first being thrown around in the 1530s, the person in charge, at least from the European side, was King Francis I of France. He was the one who sent Jacques Cartier on his voyages, expanding their empires, finding gold, getting one up on their rivals, like the kings of Spain and England. So, when Cartier came back with stories of a massive river and a land he called Canada, the king was intrigued. He wasn't ruling Canada directly, of course. He was busy in his palace in France, but he was the one funding the expeditions and giving the orders. On the ground in this new land, there wasn't a single person in charge. The territory was home to many different First Nations, each with its own leader's government territories. For example, Donnacona was the Iroquoian chief of Stadacona, the very village that gave Canada its name. He was the one who had to deal with these strange, bearded men who showed up in giant wooden ships. These indigenous leaders were the true rulers of the land. They had complex societies and had been managing their affairs for thousands of years before any European monarch even knew this continent existed. Their authority was local and based on community, not on a crown thousands of miles away. As the French established a permanent colony, New France, the power structure changed. The King of France was still the ultimate boss, but he appointed a governor-general to act as his representative in the colony. Canada's story didn't start in 1867. That was just when it got its driver's license. The story really begins thousands of years ago with the indigenous peoples who lived here, from the Haida on the west coast to the Mi'kmaq on the east. Then, around the year 1000, the Vikings, led by Leif Erikson, briefly landed in Newfoundland. They built a small settlement but didn't stick around for long, probably because the Wi-Fi was terrible. For the next 500 years, North America was left to its original inhabitants, until European explorers like John Cabot and Jacques Cartier showed up again in the late 1400s and early 1500s, kicking off a new chapter of trade, settlement, and conflict. The 1600s and 1700s were all about the battle for North America between France and Britain. It was the original rivalry, long before the Leafs and the Habs. They fought over land and, more importantly, the lucrative fur trade. This long struggle ended with the 7 Years' War, and in 1763, France gave up its colony to Britain. This led to talks about uniting the different British colonies in North America. On July 1, 1867, Ontario, Quebec, New Brunswick, Nova Scotia joined together to form the Dominion of Canada. It expanded westward with the building of the Canadian Pacific Railway. A massive undertaking that connected the country. Canada played a significant role in both World War I and World War II. We got our own flag in 1965, the beautiful maple leaf, and patriated our Constitution in 1982, meaning we could finally make changes to it without asking Britain's permission. So what is Canadian culture? It's a tough one to pin down. It's like trying to nail Jell-O to a wall. For starters, we're famously polite. We say sorry a lot, even when someone else bumps into us. It's not a sign of weakness, it's a superpower. It de-escalates situations before they even start. We also have a very particular sense of humor. It's often dry, self-deprecating, and a little bit sarcastic. We love to make fun of ourselves. We love to make fun of our weather. Another huge part of our culture is our relationship with the outdoors. A weekend at the cottage, hiking in the Rockies, canoeing in Algonquin Park. Of course, you can't talk about Canadian culture without talking about hockey. It's more than just a sport here. It's a quasi-religion. Saturday nights, families watching hockey night in Canada. Kids learning to skate, playing on frozen ponds, in local arenas. And let's not forget the food. Poutine, fries, cheese curds, gravy, maple syrup, butter tarts, ketchup-flavored chips. But maybe the most important part of modern Canadian culture is multiculturalism. We're not a melting pot, we're a mosaic. This diversity is officially recognized and celebrated. It means Canadian culture is always changing, always evolving. Before Canada was Canada, before any Europeans arrived, this land was home to hundreds of distinct and thriving societies. These are the Aboriginal peoples of Canada, also known as Indigenous peoples. They are the original inhabitants of this land with a history that goes back thousands and thousands of years. It's important to remember that they are not one single group. They are made up of three main groups recognized in the Canadian Constitution. First Nations Inuit, Métis. Each of these groups is incredibly diverse, with its own unique languages, cultures, spiritual beliefs, and traditions. The First Nations are the largest of the three groups. They lived all across the land that is now Canada, woodlands of the East Plains of the prairies coast of the Pacific. The Inuit are the indigenous people of the Arctic regions of Canada. Their name, Inuit, means the people in their language, Inuktitut. For centuries, they have thrived in one of the harshest environments on Earth. Their culture is rich with unique art, such as soapstone carving. The Métis are a distinct indigenous people with a unique history and culture. They emerged in the 18th and 19th centuries from relationships between European fur traders, mostly French Scottish men and First Nations women, mostly Cree Anishinaabe. This mixing of cultures created a new one. The settlers are the other side of the Canadian story. These were the people who came from other parts of the world, mostly from Europe, to build new lives in North America. They brought with them different languages, religions, and traditions. It's crucial to understand that the story of the settlers is a complicated one. Their arrival and the expansion of their settlements had a devastating impact on the indigenous peoples who were already living here. The relationship between the descendants of settlers and indigenous peoples is something Canada is still working to reconcile today.